Hi, everybody. Carl the Prado, A to Z Business IT. We are going to be getting started in a few minutes on our on the on our presentation, the rise of the rise of supply chain attacks, software attacks, and other things that can affect your business. We're just going to give everybody a few minutes to just check in here. We're using today a new service called StreamYard. Normally, I've been doing these on Zoom, so it's a new technology. We don't want to make you the guinea pigs here, but at the same time, I just wanted to give you a heads up. We are working through this, but don't worry. We're going to give you a lot of good information that you can take back with you today and put to use in your business. You may want to get yourself a pen and paper, take some notes. We're going to have an opportunity here to take advantage of some of the tools here and put together a strategy for yourself on a customized basis. So all that for you today. And so let's go ahead and what I'll do is we might as well. 1 minute, and we might as well start now. Okay, so who am I? My name's Carl the Prado. Just so you know who I am, I have over 30 years of experience in the cybersecurity and information technology. I'm a two-time Amazon bestseller in cybersecurity. I'm a New York State CLE and trainer for cybersecurity. I'm also a registered CE and CLE trainer in New York State. I serve as a mentor to the ASCII community, which is about 1,200 technology businesses throughout North America, and I help them with their cybersecurity. I am a husband and father of 2 children, which is my greatest achievement. And through my company, I've helped hundreds of companies since 2004 grow and protect their business through technology. So when we think of supply chain issues, this was something that caught our imagination during the quarantine. Was we couldn't get toilet paper and some of our essentials, and that happened because one of the canals got blocked. And for about, I believe it was in 2000, the Suez Canal was blocked for 6 days, and it really created quite a backup on a worldwide level. So how does the word supply chain, how does that affect your business, my business? What do we mean by that? Most of us are not running large shipping containers. I would dare to say probably nobody on this call is. So what are supply chains? They're basically they're value chain attacks, they're third-party attacks, and they compromise a business's network via application or what we call third-party entities. And they are executed by, the bad guys. And so who is the target? Well, it's small business. 66, throughout so targets are small businesses to large businesses, to governments, to schools. It's a very easy way for attackers to come in. One of the things that we look at when we, as we start here, when we talk about cybercrime and how big an issue it is actually outpacing what we think of as the number one crime, which is the drug trade. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, it's a safer business to be in if you're a criminal, unfortunately. And I'm not promoting going into cybercrime. But let's say you rob a liquor store. You try to rob a liquor store. You probably got a 50-50 chance of being killed during that transaction. Whereas if you're a cyber criminal, not only are your chances of being, harmed or hurt during the process are negligible, the chances of you being convicted are very small. We just haven't scaled up correctly in law enforcement, and for every 1 or 2, and we do get captures and we do get people who do go to jail, but it's like having a house full of cockroaches and you're catching like 2 or 3 cockroaches at a time when you have swarms of them. So, really explain the supply chain in a very simple way for those of you, I wanted to really make it non-technical. You you get an ice cream cone. You go to the store and you buy that. Well, what do you need to? What goes into making up that ice cream? Well, you've got your milk and your products. You might have a storefront. You have to have labor in there, packaging. All of those things that go in to make that final product are part of the supply chain. And even if you don't have a physical product, let's say you're an accountant, you have many different other sources that you need to run your business, whether that is your accounting program. It might be Excel, Microsoft. It could be your internet provider. It can be a bookkeeper you're working with. There's so many different things that you need, or the team that you're working with, your HR people. All of those people are interdependent and interconnected for you to make a product that's of value. And the more successful you are, the more interconnections you need, the more chain, the more people are needed in the process or services. So the supply chain attacks is a strategy that they look for vulnerabilities in the chain. Then you may be completely secure, but somebody inside of your chain may be less. So they target less secure elements from the supply network, from distributors, suppliers, and third-party vendors. And they're looking for vulnerable areas. They're not necessarily looking at their ultimate target. What they're looking at is finding the weakest spots and using those as stepping stones to other networks. So, this isn't new. It was first demonstrated by Ken Thompson in 1984. They ran one here, and it's pretty massive. I mean, we've had Target paid $18 million in 2013 for a data breach that affected 41 million people. That was through a third-party vendor attack. HVAC, it was through their HVAC vendor. Basically, they didn't secure their credentials, and that exposed Target to and their clients to this attack. So your software supply chain is most likely has a lot of inherent dependencies. That means that nobody writes software as a standalone object. They have a lot of things that are interdependent, running services that are on top of it. So you're sort of harnessing. It's sort of like a boat on the ocean. The boat doesn't create the ocean. The boat just uses the ocean. And if you look at the boat, there's multiple parts to it, from the sail, if you're using a sail ship, to the engine, to the crew that mans it. So all of these things are interdependent. It's just the same thing with software. There are many different services that the software is calling on. So what we look at is, dependency confusion that goes on. And so I wanted to talk about one, make it a little simpler for you. So what I meant to show you here is, this is a CVE. So these are issued by software manufacturers, and what they mean, what they're talking about is, when do you need to update this stuff? Well, if you get a CVE that's issued, they have a level from 1 to 10, 1 being mild and none, and 10 saying, geez, it's red hot. So let's talk about a product that you may not be using, but your vendors may be using. We're going to talk about Screen Connect. So Screen Connect was issued a CVE that was rated at 10, meaning that you needed to patch it immediately. And it's a very popular software that's used. It's both provided as a cloud-hosted solution by ConnectWise, and then people have had Screen Connect on they've locally hosted servers. And so you would have, they're used by people in MySpace IT support. They're used by copier companies, HVAC, facilities management, any business that that needs to give support to either a company or to an end user or a computer or to a service, and they need to be able to remote into a computer. When this is working well, and there's a number of these tools, it's not just Screen Connect that's out there. AnyDesk had the same issue with the CVE. What was I going to say? SolarWinds. If it's not configured correctly, it can create massive issues. And so Here's where we had to look at CV, to Screen Connect. So how hard was it for a third party to go in there? So somebody can literally grab a Screen Connect server, and what they would do is they would get this long string in the address, which would say Windows 11, colon, and then you'd have a port number, which would be 8040, and then you'd go slash setup wizard. And all they would need to do at that point, the perpetrator would be to create another slash at the end, and then you're in the Screen Connect, and now you can proceed to create your own user and password and gain full access to the system. So this is a pretty huge vulnerability. It's the reason that it's rated as a 10 as red hot. And so we're hearing rumors of how many businesses were breached. I've heard possibilities of a healthcare organization. We will hear more about this. This is a relatively new breach that has just happened, but this is just one example. So how do you deal with these type of third-party systems? I mean, obviously, you're going to need these vendors to manage your facilities, to check on your copiers, to you might have a lighting system that needs monitoring, your cameras. There's so many different places. So one of the things that you need to do is you need to monitor your systems, is monitoring the systems. And this is not, when we talk about monitoring, it's a very big difference between monitoring and antivirus. So antivirus used to be the way that perpetrators would come in the past. Viruses, I'm sorry. They would take malware tools, they would load them on the computer, and the way the antivirus would work is it would say, hey, I just noticed a piece of code, and I have in my database file that same code as a bad guy, and I'm going to block it. And so that's how antivirus works. The problem with that is what happens when it's the tools that you're supposed to be working with. So you need to have now a new set of rules. You actually need to see how programs are working and their behaviors are acting. And that is done through monitoring of the systems themselves, the network. And that's done through a few services. You may hear that technically one is called a Security Operations Center, or a SOC. And then you have a SIEM, which basically pulls in all of the information from the network, and as far as behaviors are concerned, and it basically ingests that into the SOC so that they can monitor and see the behavior. So if all of a sudden they notice that the Screen Connect is making a call to an unapproved location, or there's an unapproved behavior, that is the quickest way to notify that. By the way, Screen Connect isn't just remoting in. It can load programs in there. It can proceed to, you could say, well, it's only on one computer, but because you can load files and download and execute programs, it can proceed to go out inside of your network and then basically it's in there. It's acting as if it's got full access. So that's part of the problem with that. You also need to segregate your system so that if one machine gets infected, not all of them will. The other part you want to do is, depending on the size, is you want to send out questionnaires to your third-party vendors saying, okay, when you remote in there, here, what is your security policy? Not just what is, yours, and if you have a pretty robust one, but it's not as robust if you're not checking your vendors out. Now, Microsoft will never send you a vendor list, nor will never answer a questionnaire, nor will QuickBooks, but they will give you at least a SOC 2 audit and say, okay, this is what's going on. But for your smaller operations, they certainly will be able to answer your vendor requests. I get that request asked of me all the time. We also help companies send out questionnaires on their behalf. So I grabbed this from CloudStrike, just talking about the 2024 Global Threat Report and the overview of what's going on here. So one of the things we want to talk about is what is an adversary. So an adversary is a nation state that basically is a home to cyber criminals. And in 2023, we've gone up 34 known adversaries. These are very big players in the space. These are people like Black Cat, or Alpha, who was responsible for the MGM Caesar attack, which took out 90 casinos and resorts throughout the world, and basically was the reason why there had to be, I'm sorry, and was the reason why they had to have, they paid, I'm sorry, Caesars paid out $15 million in ransomware. Cloud conscious, cloud cases have increased 110% year over date. And this is going to continue to increase because people aren't necessarily looking on the systems themselves anymore. They're looking on what we call SaaS applications, software as a service. And about 87% of all breaches that happen now happen through SaaS. 75% of the environment intrusion, were environmental intrusions. We're also seeing, what was I going to say? That they're actually increasing the we're focused on e-crime as far as that was concerned. But the big numbers you want to know is basically everything has been going up in the space. It's unfortunately not a surprise. But when we look at the activity by region, when you look at North America, you see that basically 61% of all the attacks are coming in on us. If this was a war zone, we'd be basically looking at the rest of the world coming in. Europe comes in as a small second. I think they're at 7%. As far as that's concerned, I mean, we do have some stuff that's coming back to Russia and the Ukraine at 6%. Africa is at 1%. China does get a little bit. And where do we see this? The attacks being by industry. We look at technology, telecommunication, finance, government. So finance is, almost 50% more than what the government attacks are. Manufacturing's at 8%, and healthcare is at 8%. So we have a lot of rules and regulations that have now been started to be enforced onto the financial side to catch up as far as that's concerned. And then we have just general services. We still have almost as much, 2/3 of the attacks that are going on into services, as far as that's concerned. And so how fast do these things happen? So when we're looking at the attacks here inside of the systems, gaining legitimate credentials takes about 40 minutes for the attackers to come. And they are running discovery, they're running their tools. They're doing that from the time that they get into the system. Within less than 4 minutes, they're already up there. And so that's what's going through here. They're going into what we call control panels, which are basically the gates to the kingdom. And one of the things that we're looking at here is, and this all comes, by the way, from CrowdStrike, is that today's advanced cyber attacks succeed within minutes. And they're using hands-on techniques. They're using what we call legitimate tools. And these are the bigger challenges. So this requires that your IT team needs to know not only, about what to protect from the outside threats as far as malware and other attacks are concerned, but they also need to know what's on your system, what's patched correctly. And they also need to know what the vendors are using inside of your systems. And so that's part of it. And also being able to monitor the credentials and how they're being used. Again, the target attack was because they found that a third-party vendor had credentials into their system, and that vendor had not been, the contractor who had been in had left the company a year before then. So these were open credentials that just were not being monitored correctly. And so, one of the other part that we look at, the themes of last year, were identity-based and social engineering attacks. And so, we're looking at account credentials were the number one and by far the easiest ones for them to obtain. They could authenticate the systems and the user accounts. We saw this happening there. Session cookies. This was done once they got the account credentials for Uber. They were able to send 200 multi-factor authentication requests to a IT admin asking for a password reset. which is what we call an OTM, one-time password. And because they had enough information, they were able to get on his WhatsApp account, and he gave them that information, and that got them root access into the system. So let's talk about an application that most people use on a smaller businesses use, and that's QuickBooks Online. Probably one of the more popular business line applications out there. So, when we're talking about SaaS applications, software as a service, QuickBooks is by far one of the more popular ones. Between that, Gmail or Google Workspace and Office 365, those are kind of the three core bread and butter applications that we see in most businesses with less than 100 employees. And so let's talk about a story that I was called into, where somebody actually was a victim of this breach. So I was called into a small construction company, and they had 15 full-time staff. They had 20 seasonal employees. They were doing very high-end landscaping. These were people who'd come in. When you see a rooftop penthouse and the garden on the outside, these are the people you would call. They only took cash, so they had to deal with wire transfers. And they're very proud of saying that they only worked with the 1% of the 1%. So the owner's email in this organization had been hacked 3 times in the past. He had ignored it. He just reset his password, set it and forget it, and that was it. And problem was, because they hacked the owner's email, they were able to get into the bookkeepers. So this is a perfect supply chain. The owner actually didn't have anything of value in there except the ability to be impersonated so that the bookkeeper would be breached. And what happened next was, and the only reason that the bookkeeper noticed that they had an issue was QuickBooks locked them out of the account. Apparently, after a while of being in the account, the attackers decided that they would try and write a check to themselves. QuickBooks noticed that and shut the account down. Now, here's where things get interesting. So they were doing their own payroll through QuickBooks. So they had all the employee information, all the PII and PCI information on the employees, birth dates, credit cards, Social Security, New York, driver's licenses, all of that. And because they were able to get in there, QuickBooks could, they could export all of that data. They also got all of the customer lists. Now they didn't have any credit cards, and even if they'd gotten into the credit cards, QuickBooks protects that part of it so that they couldn't get in. And but they still had all the consumer data. Now, once you hit over 500 records of basically that have been exposed, this automatically triggers by the FTC safeguard rules and automatic reporting. You have 30 days to do that as a company. If you're in New York State, California has a very similar rule, and most states do. You have a 30-day reporting rule, and that, I could tell you, since I'm New York-based, but I serve clients all over the country, most of the regulations already have a 30-day reporting, and it starts at the 500 threshold. Are there some exceptions? Yes. But in most cases, you're going to either have it on the national level and or the state level, as well as at the industry level. So like for New York State, we also have the Department of Financial Services. They've gone ahead and matched that, also saying 30 days, 500 records that you need to start notifying. So automatically that's triggering all of this in. You have to get a breach security lawyer in on that at that point. But wait, there was more. There wasn't just the data there. You said, well, they didn't get to any money. They just got to all the customers, contact information. But they also had Dropbox. And I said, oh, what do you keep in Dropbox? We just keep all the papers to our wire transfers. So that means that all the wire transfers for all those, 1% of 1% clients that was never, properly maintained or destroyed, the bad guys had full access into that. And so, like I said, with exposure to only 500 records, let's just run this. This comes from eRisk. So we're looking at just a small incident. the investigation, customer. Now they throw in here one number, which is the class action lawsuit, which is almost $300,000. Um, don't know how realistic that is. I'm not an attorney, um, but I'm sure that there are class actions for that size or smaller that have been even larger. So this is an aggregated average. This is not a guarantee, but you can start to see the cost per record that as far as the damage that was done to the company themselves. And this is not even including the slowdown of work that comes to a business. It brings businesses to halts. It really just slows them right down here. But like I said, a small breach here, it's not unrealistic to be $500,000. So I wanted to take hold on one second, a little technical problem here. So we pop over a couple here. We're having some problems with some slides abroad.
You come up with better and these methods that we say you come up with better ways to get.
So the questions are, my staff is trained. I have the right tools in place. But what would you do if your most trusted vendor sent you something like this? This is a basic scam message that shows that the vendor has been compromised. Or they text you something like this, asking for a Zelle, payment. This actually happened to a North Texas woman, and she lost thousands to it, unfortunately. And so we see this. Not only do you have to make sure your side is protected, but you also have to make sure that your vendors are doing the best, to protect themselves, because it's no longer just a risk to their business; it's a risk to yours. And by the way, if you think about your clients, because they're hearing these conversations as well, that they have to make sure that their vendors are there. So this is sort of like basically a sea change moment where businesses really have to take a much more serious look, make sure not only that they're doing everything correctly, but they're making sure that the people that they do business with are doing everything correctly. So let's give you I want to give you a couple of tips and tricks here on the way out. So we have what we call third-party risks and weaknesses in vendor management, and because they're in the background, we also see a lack of visibility. And so how do we proceed to stop the bleeding or the potential damage here? Well, first of all, we need to perform risk assessments on a regular basis. We need to establish security protocols, making sure that if one account, that the accounts have controls in place, so that, and if there are accounts that need to have what we call a God mode or a global admin rights, that they're very limited, controlled, and monitored, so that it's not just everybody there. And you also have to be able to know what's going on in the outside world. When we talk about these CVEs, which vendor, potentially, that you're using might be compromised because of this. You need to developing security policies and implementing those controls. And most importantly, you need to train employees to know how important and how that they, this is, and how quickly they need to act. You need to, so it's really a question of performing due diligence and establishing vendor security requirements and conducting regular audits and recognizing, the threats that are there. one discussion I just had with somebody when we're talking about the Screen Connect is, even if, we have co-managed situations where we might have an in-house IT and they're really good at keeping the day-to-day things up and running and functioning, but security is not their first priority. So when they see a CVE, they'll go, I'm going to get to it. But just like any, when you go to see a doctor, you have what we call generalists and then you have specialists. And the difference between the two is the breadth of understanding of one particular topic. So there are CVEs that may not necessarily need immediate attention, but there are ones that are fires. And that's where, a discussion is, needs to be done immediately. So to say to the guy, this is a priority and as far as that's concerned. And then, reporting of security incidents, this is more of a compliance thing. So it all comes down to, when you have a breach, it's containment, investigation, and remediation. So I know I'm sounding a little bit like that, like the broken, like I'm going over this again for the second time, and I apologize for that. But, if you get anything out of this, supply side attacks are a growing threat. It's really having trained individuals who know who know how to read the tea leaves, how to understand what's going on, and being able to delegate those resources in a prudent and timely manner, which are going to be the ways that we turn back the clock on this madness. So, one of the reasons I held this meeting here today is obviously this just gives you a brief overview of what the third-party attacks are. But, here at A to Z Business IT, we're on a mission to work with businesses to protect their data. We see how much damage this does on a national, area, and how it can basically close businesses down. And so we've sat down and said, well, what can we do to at least start righting the ship? Small businesses are the lifeblood of America. And, when a small business closes, because, there are many ways that a small business can close, but usually it's not just themselves that close. It's a family that they're affecting. And if they've employed people, it's multiple families. So we take this with a lot of passion as far as what we can do to help protect them and their data. So what I wanted to offer everybody here was a free 30-minute cybersecurity checkup. This is normally a $600 value, and we wanted to give this to you as our thanks for attending this meeting. There's a QR code that's been up at the top saying scan me. That brings you into a calendar. And what we'll do for you is we will go over key areas in your business and how they stack up, with the best practices industry-wide. We will give you a 15-point roadmap on what you need to protect your business from internal and external threats, and we will give you the next steps you can do to take to protect your business. Like I said, this is this is customized to your particular business, and we will give you the roadmaps for that of what you should be looking at, what you should be spending most of your best efforts on, what stuff may not be applicable to you. We'll go through that, and at the end of this time, you'll have some action points that you can take and implement immediately into your business right away. And so this was, again, it's at strategy.a2zbusinessit.com. That's strategy.a2zbusinessit.com. And again, that's our way of saying thank you to you. So I appreciate your time. I hope you all have the best day. And thank you and take care. Again, thanks.